Welcome to episode 2 of Arbiter of Worlds. Today I'm going to be continuing my guide to being a great game master. Now, this is only my second time recording an episode of YouTube, but I'm already learning a lot. The most important thing I've learned so far is that recording YouTube videos is fundamentally about saying things on the internet that make other people on the internet upset. And it's like, that's great. Because while I am not at all experienced at video recording or video editing, I am super experienced at making people upset. So I think I'm going to thrive here on YouTube. All right, so that said, let's get into it. Last episode, I discussed the origin of the Game Master role in miniature wargaming, and I laid out the 4 functions of the RPG Game Master. And those are Judge, World Builder, Adversary, Storyteller. And I called storytelling the least important function, and I assigned the judging function as the first and the most basic role. And before I plunge into an explanation of the importance of judging, which I'm going to do in a lot of future episodes, I want to respond to this common criticism I get on my position, and I want to offer an explanation for why I have different advice than all those other GM channels. When I list the 4 functions of the GM, the most common response I get is that I'm totally wrong, because the real job of the GM is to make sure people have fun. Well, I disagree. I mean, if you're the GM, it is not your job to make sure people have fun. I'm going to say that again. If you're the GM, it is not your job to make sure people have fun. In fact, this belief that when a player doesn't have fun, it means the GM has failed, it's caused more GMs, more grief, and more heartburn than any other myth in gaming. You can be an amazing GM, and yet a player might not have fun. Because whether or not people have fun is going to depend on factors that are outside your control. How did their spouse treat them on the way over? How was their day at work? How well did they roll the dice? Do they play the game as well as the other players? And you can't control these things, and therefore, you shouldn't feel responsible for them. And this is like Stoicism 101. Now, what you should feel responsible for doing is creating an environment in which everyone could have fun, right? I want you to imagine you're hosting a party. Your job is to provide the right mix of appetizers, drinks, ambiance, crowd, so that people can have fun. But it's not for you to act like a clown because Rob had a bad day at work. This is a subtle point, but if you keep it in mind, you can avoid a lot of self-inflicted doubt and stress about your role. All right, so how do you create an environment in which everyone could have fun? I'm going to offer a theoretical answer to this question, and it involves a concept that I call the agency theory of fun. Now, in philosophy, agency is the capacity for human beings to make choices and impose those choices on the world. And it's my belief that in our everyday lives, humans in modern society feel an absence of agency. Most of our capacity for meaningful choice has been deprived. Our daily lives, our routine, our scope of choice is limited by lack of opportunity, lack of resources, and very few people really get to change the world in even a small way. So almost everyone locks on to meaningless decisions such as what football team to support, what color to dye their hair. And it's all as a means of expressing this underlying need for agency. And cognitive scientists who've studied these things have found that intelligent people feel the lack of agency more poignantly than most. And it actually creates a sense of existential depression in them. Now, for more on this, check out this fascinating book, Misdiagnosis, Dual Diagnosis of Gifted Children and Adults. You can get it on Amazon. It's a great read for anyone who is smart enough to understand my RPGs. Okay, so I think this great joy elicited by tabletop RPGs is a result of creating a sense of agency among the players. And, in an RPG, by making choice X, the player can impose result Y, and that's the essence of agency. And because tabletop RPGs are an experience that you share within this meaningful social circle of friends and colleagues and comrades, result Y feels meaningful. It is meaningful. In a sense, in the context of your circle of friends, Nick really did save Eric's life last week. It happened. It mattered, right? And so, because tabletop RPGs are enjoyed sequentially in a campaign format, the number of choices that you make And the impact of those choices, it compounds over time. And so the game becomes more meaningful the longer it's experienced. And that's why long-term campaigns are way more fun than one-off sessions. And it's why playing with a bunch of close friends is more fun than playing solo or with a group of strangers you're never going to see again. Sustained campaigns with close friends, those create this really strong sense of agency. And it is a tragedy for our hobby that most players never get to enjoy long-running campaigns with stable groups, because that is the platonic ideal. Okay, so how does a campaign effectively create a sense of agency? Well, the players have to be able to make real and not fake choices. Real choices that have real consequences on the players and their world. And that's a requirement which is in direct opposition to storytelling, and it's a direct opposition to making sure everyone has fun. Imagine your party has only a few minutes to find the artifact that can close, the gate to the abyss, right? And like the artifact could be underneath the Dark Citadel, it could be on the peak of like the Lonely Mountain, and you don't have time to search both, right? Now, if you have real choice, right, the artifact is really in one location or the other, and your choice is going to determine whether or not you find it. On the other hand, if you have fake choice, if you only think you have choice, then whatever choice you make, that'll be where the artifact is, and there'll be some interesting pre-scripted encounter of your level that forces you to fight to get it, right? So in that latter instance, either choice seems fun, but both choices are fake. And many GMs never want to offer real choice, because the problem with real choice is that players can only be sure they have real choice when they suffer meaningfully bad consequences. And in the context of a tabletop RPG, meaningfully bad consequences usually means permanent destruction of something the players love. It could be a favorite henchman, it could be an irreplaceable magic item, it could be an animal companion that they love, it could be their player character. And for a while, a skilled sleight of hand artist can maintain suspension of disbelief about this. He can lead the players on a roller coaster ride that makes them think they're making real choices, it makes them think they're facing meaningful consequences. I used to run games like that. And it's the same art that a skilled novelist can use to make us believe that, James Bond is in danger, even though we know they're already working on the sequel, right? But, this never-ending string of perfect, dramatically appropriate, fun outcomes, that defy probability in a game, they eventually lead even the dimmest players to realize they don't have real choice at all. The roller coaster might be a wild ride, but it's still this railroad. And when the railroading gets revealed, the sense of agency dies. And when the sense of agency dies, that kills the unique enjoyment that a tabletop RPG can offer. So that's like the paradox of tabletop RPG game mastering, right? In order to make sure that everybody could have fun, you have to be willing to let the players make choices that lead to results that aren't fun. You cannot guarantee the fun. You cannot guarantee the fun. If you try to make sure everyone has fun, eventually you guarantee that no one has fun at all, because you destroy the sense of agency, which is at the root of the hobby's pleasure. The agency theory of fun also explains why rules matter. Rules in a tabletop RPG are ultimately about what philosophers call action, where action means intentional effects caused by an agent. It's the rules that dictate the results of action and thus define the relationship between a player's choices and the consequences he experiences. The rules provide the framework of cause and effect that gives meaning to choice. And that's why virtually every RPG has rules that dictate things like when you choose to attack a target, how the success or failure of the attack is determined, the consequences of each. Because a game without rules cannot provide a sense of agency any more than a world without causality can, right? If the players are operating subject to arbitrary outcomes, what the ancients used to call acts of God and, RPG designers call GM fiat, then they have no meaningful way of knowing or understanding what the consequences of their choices will be, and they have no agency. That's why so many players hate Mother May I type role-playing games. And the agency theory of fun also explains why esoteric games like Amber Diceless or Everway never catch on. And it also explains why, as games evolve, they tend to evolve in the direction of more rules. Comprehensible, detailed rules, they add to the player's sense of agency. It's just like playing with friends in an ongoing campaign. It makes the game better. And no, that doesn't mean that extremely complex games are an unmitigated good, but that's a critique for another time. For now, let's just say that the simplest rule system that can grant agency is best. Now, agency also explains why dice are always going to be an important mechanic within RPGs. Go back to that example of the hidden artifact. If the consequences are predetermined, then the choice isn't real, right? Like there's an inherent contradiction between omniscience about the future and free will. And it's plagued religion for thousands of years, and it plagues RPGs too. So imagine if tabletop RPG combat went like this. The player says something like, "I attack the dragon." And the GM responds, "Well, based on your attack bonus and the dragon's armor class, you're certain to miss. Don't bother rolling." So then the player's like, I don't attack. Right? It's hard to imagine that game is fun because the result of the player's choices is determined before he's made them. It's the same reason that tic-tac-toe isn't fun. Determinism ends up depriving you of agency. So in a tabletop RPG, agency requires that we be able to predict the consequences of our choices, but not be able to predict them with certainty, right? So look at D&D's core mechanic. To determine if your character succeeds at a task, you roll a d20, you add any relevant modifiers, you compare the result to a target number. If the result equals or exceeds the target number, your character succeeds. If the result is lower, your character fails, right? So the relevant modifiers and the target number, those are the causality. The d20, that's the uncertainty, and both are essential to agency. And that means if you mess with the dice, you mess with agency, which brings us to the F word. It's obscene, but I'm going to say it anyway. Fudging. Fudging the dice. We're going to talk about that obscenity more in our next video. For now, if you enjoyed today's episode, hit the like and subscribe buttons, push that notification bell. I don't actually know what the notification bell does, but all of the other YouTubers are asking you to do it, so I am also asking you to do it. I'm like a cargo cult YouTuber. All right, I'll see you again soon.